For a few years, Chillicothe, Ohio sent soldiers to World War I. We'll cover that on Markings of History coming up.
Tecumseh. Fascinating. Captivating. Mesmerizing. Tecumseh.
I'm Leader Media's Mike Smith, along with Kevin Coleman with Intrepid Heritage Services, talking about the famous World War I Camp Sherman. And Kevin, tens of thousands of young men trained here in preparation for the First World War.
Right, this was a huge development. It was a big boost to the economy. You can see the population of Chillicothe rose from 16,000 to 60,000 because of all the troops coming through here.
And the camp was here, of course, the United States got into World War I rather late, with only about a year to go, but the camp stayed on for another couple of years after the war ended in 1918.
Right, it remained open until 1920, and actually the gate posts down on High Street were built in 1919 after the war, but while the camp was still pretty busy.
Of course, part of what happened at Camp Sherman during that time frame was the pandemic of 1918, and quite a few of the soldiers paid the price not in war, but from disease.
Yes, the Spanish flu pandemic, and coincidentally, the same number of Army staff and soldiers died as died a generation later in Pearl Harbor, 1,100 if I remember right.
Now, we've had kind of a theme in recent episodes about the role that African Americans played in our area history, and African American soldiers were trained here too at Camp Sherman.
Yes, they were in a separate division. Actually, the Army had been desegregated, and President Wilson resegregated it, but there are good photos and documentation of their presence here at the camp.
Where did most of those who were training at Camp Sherman, where were they coming from? Not just Ohio, I assume.
Camp Sherman served I believe a 3-state region, and the name of the streets in the camp reflected that. They decided to name them to help the boys not feel too homesick. So that's why we have Sandusky Boulevard, Moundsville Road, a few others I can't think of, but there was a whole grid of streets throughout the camp.
So what laid out as Camp Sherman from 1917 to the year 1920, that covers a lot of ground now that as we look at, you would never think that an Army camp ever existed here. What other areas might people be familiar with that was a part of Camp Sherman?
Well, our new armory, the Camp Sherman Readiness Center, that was the rifle range for Camp Sherman. And in fact, the U.S. government still owns Mount Logan as a backdrop for the rifle range. Also, Cider Trail State Park was the artillery range. And Pleasant Valley, the park up on Pleasant Valley Road, or Egypt Pike. Pleasant Valley Wildlife Recreation Area, the park there was a part of, that's where they practiced digging trenches.
What is now the Veterans Affairs Medical Center, was that part of that grounds as well?
Absolutely. They started using Camp Sherman buildings to train veterans to get a new start on life. And of course, the 2 prisons, the prison farms, which are now mostly shut down, Gateway Industrial Park, Uniado schools are all developed on Camp Sherman land.
Is there any type of structure, whether stone or building, that still exists that was a part of Camp Sherman?
Well, by the very name was meant to be a temporary complex like camp. There is one building which remains on its original site, and that is the library, which we referred to at the public library on South Payne Street that Burton Stevenson helped organize. That's the only one still on its original site. Now, when the camp was decommissioned, a lot of the buildings were auctioned off, and so there was building supplies that were reused. Some buildings were moved, but there's only one still on its original site.
And there's still an entrance on the south side of what was the camp that's in Chillicothe that marks, I guess, what was the south entrance at that time.
Right, the concrete gate posts at Wharf Street, across from Church Street. That was meant to be a way to control vehicular traffic and pedestrian traffic into the camp. And the freeway has confused the connection, but that road was built on top of the canal, and then it comes out here as Columbus Street.
Reliving the famous World War I Camp Sherman. For our producer, Aaron Glandon, and for Kevin Coleman of Intrepid Heritage Services, I'm Mike Smith for Litter Media's Markings of History.